go far. There you go. Well, good morning. As we trickle in, my name is Ben Hempstead. I'm chair of the AFA Board currently of Directors, and I'd like to welcome you to our 2017 Aerospace Summit. Looks like we've got a pretty good crowd today, and really excited about AFA Summits. We usually stay really close to our schedule and get you moving through the program on time, so let's maintain that momentum. Exciting day planned today. Big deal of the day is our Titan of Industry Award, presented to Ray Connor. That'll be in the middle of the day. It's really hard to imagine our industry here in the state, across the globe, being different without Ray's guidance and leadership. Decades and decades of leadership, so we really appreciate that. We're excited to recognize that in the middle of the day today. And we applaud him making a transition to his newest venture, and we'll see him around the middle of the day. First on the docket this morning, we're going to have a presentation by Tom Captain. He's an expert, really like hearing him speak, as formerly with Deloitte. He's going to take us through some economic views of what's going on in industry and a view of the competitiveness for Washington State for retaining and attracting aerospace business. I work at Electroimpact. We're a global supplier of tooling and automation, and we're seeing that competitiveness, and I'd like to see what his view is on that. We're also going to have some fireside chats. It's kind of a fun term. It's a little smaller group, not quite a panel, but it'll be insightful. And we'll have some more awards, and we're also going to see a presentation from a team for First Robotics. Hopefully many of you have interacted with First Robotics or have an opportunity to do that. We think it's a fantastic way to bring young people into not just aerospace, but technical careers in general, which there's a real need for. So hope you give them a warm welcome later today. At the moment, I would like to take a minute to recognize the elected officials who've taken some time out of their schedule to join us today. I wonder if you could stand and be recognized. And we've got our executive, Dave Summers, here in front. Thank you. Somewhere out there, we've got our Honorable Mayor Nicola Smith from Lynnwood. Thank you. There you are. Great. Okay. And Senator Patty Kruger, I think, is here. She in there somewhere? There we are. Great. Thanks. I think Trent's keeping an eye out. Did I miss anybody? No? Okay. So probably more will join us, and we'll recognize them through the day. Also like to take a minute to recognize my esteemed fellow board members on the AFA. I really like working with this group of people. It's a fantastic collection of industry experts and some elected officials and some people from our school system, all levels. Really important when we get together and talk about industry is really valuable. There's probably 25 of them here, so we're not going to name everyone, but if you could stand up and be recognized for a moment, that would be great. Diversity of OEMs, MROs, design companies. Fantastic. We believe in working with a shared vision for our industry, and we really focus on communicating that vision to our elected leaders in Olympia. That's really the main mission of our board, is to help bring an understanding of our industry needs to Olympia and help shed light on kind of what's going on out there. So overall goal there to make sure that they understand how important it is to keep our industry strong here in Washington. If you're not an AFA member, you should be. Hopefully everyone here is a member. If you're not a member, you can connect with Kelly Maloney, who's our executive director. Thank you, Kelly. She'll be here all day, of course. We'd really like to engage you and figure out how we can help you in your company mission and how you can help us in our mission as well. Now I'd like to have Leo Baldaccini, board member with Umbra, come up and introduce our executive.
Good morning, everybody. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dave Summers, Snohomish County Executive, who will provide our welcome today. But first, a little bit about Dave. Dave is a Snohomish County Executive, managing the 14 diverse departments that comprise the Snohomish County government, including Public Works, Painfield Airport, Emergency Management, Human Services. medical examiner, parks and planning development services. Dave previously served for 14 years on the Snohomish County Council. He's focused on creating regional partnerships to benefit the residents of Snohomish County, improving customer service, and ensuring that the finances of the county are sustainable. He's committed to improving the delivery of services to the homeless and ensuring everything possible is being done to protect the most vulnerable members of our community. Dave is Vice President of the Puget Sound Regional Council and serves on the Sound Transit Board. Okay.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Actually, I started out my career as going to be I was a biologist for many years. And then I got angry at local government for not doing enough to protect this great county we have and help it grow gracefully. So I got angry and I ran for office and I won, to my shock. But I very much enjoy working in Snohomish County, and I wish I had more time because I'd love to talk to you about how we're applying lean manufacturing techniques to county government. That's the thing I'm most excited about. But I want to thank Kelly Maloney for getting us together today again, another wonderful conference, and Mayor Smith from Lynnwood, who you'll hear from in a few minutes, but a beautiful facility here in Lynnwood, and in just a few short years, we hope you'll have a light rail connection from SeaTac if you come from out of town, right here to, right next door to the event center here. As you know, Snohomish County is often called the Aerospace County, since we have the largest collection of aerospace companies in the state, as well as the largest manufacturing plant in the world. We are home to where Boeing produces the best airliners in the world, and we also have the best workers in the world, highly skilled and motivated to design, engineer, and build the world's greatest ideas. And we're working hard to even improve that workforce. Snohomish County has become a magnet for innovation in many fields, and we excel in aerospace. Whether you plan to fly to Portland or Prague, you can be certain there's probably a link to Snohomish County. This year's summit theme is the future of aerospace and aviation. Well, the future of aerospace and aviation is critical not just for aerospace industry, but vital to the economic success of our local and regional community. When aerospace thrives, so does Snohomish County. When one of our companies develops the next innovative plane or software, we extend our creativity into the next generation. Boeing alone employs about 38,000 people in Snohomish County. If you add the economic activity around just Payne Field, it accounts for almost 60,000 jobs here. Equally important is the presence of our other aerospace companies like Esterline, BLR Aerospace, ATS, and Crane. We're proud of them all. So what does the future of aerospace and aviation hold for us? We will see even greater investments in innovation. Will we become a 21st century magnet for the next generation of entrepreneurs and workers? I'm confident we can answer yes to all those questions. Right up the road at Payne Field, we will soon have commercial air service. This new asset in our region will give our residents easy access to the world, and it's going to be a very high quality service tailored not only for our citizens and their recreational and tourist needs, but also for our business community. As you probably saw, both Alaska Air and United Airlines have announced flights, and United has been very specific. They'll be flying into their San Francisco hub and their Denver hub. We will continue to do everything in our power to retain the title of Washington's Aerospace County, and we look forward to your continued partnership in the years to come. Finally, as a region, I'm very committed to this. We must do all we can to try and attract the next innovative ideas, whether in education, software, design, or aerospace. If we don't, we may lose out on opportunities to keep our economy growing and our excellent workforce employed. So thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful conference, and I look forward to meeting many of you. Thank you.
Well, good morning and welcome to our annual conference, Aerospace Futures Alliance. My name is David Beyer, and I'm president of Everett Community College. You know, being in this job, I'm fortunate I get to meet a lot of different people, and I get to become involved with a lot of different organizations. I've been a member of the Aerospace Futures Alliance, I think since its inception almost, years ago, and it's one of the most important boards that I have the opportunity to be associated with. And industry is very important to Everett Community College and the things that we do, and the aerospace industry in particular, and the growth and expansion of our programs has been is directly related to our involvement with AFA and our industry partners. And so we feel very fortunate to have Aerospace Futures Alliance as a partner of Everett Community College and the industries that are involved with them. So I'm here to introduce our next speaker, and that is Nicola Smith. And it is my honor to introduce her. She has brought people into focus in the city of Lynnwood, highlighting and acknowledging the many accomplishments of staff and the people that live in her community, and bringing equity and inclusion practices to the city, as well as serving more veterans. As a former dean at Edmonds Community College, where she worked for more than 25 years, Nicola also ran the college's Youth Foreign Exchange Program and International Studies programs. She earned her undergraduate degree from the University of Washington in Danish language and literature, and a master's degree from Western Washington University's Everett campus, actually right on Everett Community College's campus, in adult education and administration. So, side note about Nicola is, a number of years ago I had the opportunity to meet her in an interview for a vice president position at Everett Community College, and I know she was a dedicated professional in the field of higher education, and interestingly, I've never been able to figure this out. After the interview, she went into politics. Never have been able to figure that out, but it's a pleasure to welcome Mayor Nicola Smith.
Thank you, President Beyer. Yeah, we go back a ways. If you would have hired me, I wouldn't have been mayor. So there. Good, now you've had enough coffee. Welcome to Lynnwood. It is my absolute delight to welcome you here and into this beautiful space, our convention center. So I hope you enjoy your day in this space and have the ability to relax a little bit and learn from each other and connect. As we know, the AFA serves to connect our leaders in aerospace to ensure that our state continues to thrive as a global leader. And connecting to aerospace is incredibly important to Lynnwood. Back in 1959, I was going to decide whether I was going to tell you that was the year I was born, but I did. Back in 1959, Lynnwood was incorporated. So Lynnwood was born the same year I was. And the first mayor that came out of Lynnwood in 1959 was Mayor Herdlicka, Merle Herdlicka, and he was a Boeing employee. So he started working for Boeing in the early 1960s, and he was a really active community member, and he served as our mayor for 25 years. We all fondly called him Herc. So these connections to the past are our foundations for today and present opportunities for our future. With the growing aerospace industry, Lynnwood has become home to many aerospace employees, and I think about 2,000 leave Lynnwood every day to go up and work at Boeing, actually. So our community directly benefits from aerospace, which turns into supporting our commercial, our retail, and hospitality business sectors. And what a better example than this wonderful convention center. So as Lynnwood looks to the future, aerospace will play a major role. Programs offered through our community colleges continue to train students in engineering and technology and aviation manufacturing. And located in our proximity to Payne Field, I can hardly wait to fly out of Payne Field. I can hardly wait to fly out from Payne Field. Our aerospace is going to really impact our economic industry and our future connections to our commercial air service. So since its founding, Lynnwood's been connected to aerospace. This connection continues to grow and now until the future. And if I can be of service to any of you here in Lynnwood, please come knock on my door at City Hall, and I will make sure that you feel included and connected into our community, and I look forward to working with any and many of you in the coming days. So have a wonderful day today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Robin Toth, and I'm the Vice President of Business Development for Greater Spokane Incorporated, which is Spokane County's economic development organization. It's my pleasure to be here today. I am a proud AFA board member, and I think since this is our 12th Aerospace Summit, I haven't been to all 12, but I think this is probably my 10th. So it's a great organization, and as Ben said earlier, if you're not a member yet, please see Kelly, our president and executive director, and she'll get you taken care of. It's my pleasure to make 2 introductions right now. We have 2 presentations coming up. Some of you may want to attend the breakout session, which is in room 2BC, which is to my right, your left. In partnership with Impact Washington, we have Cytelix that's going to be providing a session on cybersecurity readiness for manufacturing. Cytelix is providing an overview on how DoD, Department of Defense contractors, can be prepared for the December 31st deadline for NIST SP 800-171, and I assume that some of you know what that is. I don't know. Cyber compliance to meet DFARS 252.704-701 regulations. If you're interested in that information, you can attend that session now. The second session we'll have here in this room, and it's my pleasure to introduce a gentleman with an immense aerospace knowledge and background. Tom Captain is a retired Deloitte vice chairman and leader in aerospace and defense, and is one of the most experienced industry advisors in the country. Tom recently retired after 36 years at Deloitte, where he served clients in commercial and regional aircraft and general aviation, as well as commercial airlines. He participated in the launch of several commercial aircraft programs and has extensive experience in the defense industry, serving clients in fighter, heavy lift, bomber, attack and fixed wing aircraft and rotorcraft. He's a primary author of the recent Deloitte study titled The Aerospace and Defense Industry in the U.S., a Financial and Economic Impact Study. He provides industry perspectives to the media, such as Wall Street Journal, Reuters, Bloomberg, BBC, National Defense, Associated Press, UPI, Jane's Defense Weekly, LA Times, Seattle Times, Business Week, and Aviation Week, and Space Technology. You can see that we have quite an expert here. He also has made appearances on Fox Business News and Defense News Today, and authored the recent study Transforming the Air Transportation Systems, and he's testified in front of the Congressional Aviation Subcommittee. He also presented to the Senate Banking Committee on the importance of the Export-Import Bank Reauthorization Act regarding support for the space industry. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Tom Captain.
It's a delight to be here again this year, and it's such an enjoyable experience to see many of my colleagues and friends and clients that I've had over the years. As been mentioned by Robin, I did just recently retire after 36 years, wonderful years at Deloitte, where I led the aerospace defense practice. And after taking a long and much-deserved vacation, I'm back and delighted to be here. What I want to do today is to talk about Washington State and its competitiveness in the market. And as you can see, I have both a picture of Washington State, thank you, as well as the world. And what I want to do is to break that down into what are the factors of competition, and what are the things that are in the value chain that are creating the challenges, but also the opportunities for people like you or suppliers here. So before I move on, let me just go through the agenda for the next 30 minutes. I have some opening remarks about where we stand, but also want to share the considerations for aerospace site selections and retention, and why this is such a challenge for governments, both local, state, as well as sovereign and federal governments, to retain their aerospace jobs and the economy that they support. Then I'll talk about not only state but also global competitors based on three metrics. One is jobs, two is wages, and the last one is exports. And then I'll talk a little bit about the market dynamics of the aerospace industry. Then another topic that has hit the news here recently with some of the large merger announcements that have been made. I'll talk about the production cost dynamics, which is much of what many of the suppliers in this room, and as well as the large airplane companies, struggle with to try to meet customer demands. And then I'll end with a balanced scorecard about Washington State, where we stand on all those dimensions that we talked about, and then summarize some thoughts for you. Let me first start with some opening remarks. First of all, aerospace is a highly desirable sector because of its high wages, technology base, economic multiplier, as well as the innovation engine and highly educated workforce that it attracts. Since 1916, some of you were able to attend the Boeing Centennial a year ago last July 15th as it was. The Pacific Northwest has really been the lead, the global epicenter for aerospace, to both good and not so good effect. And I'll be frank and honest and direct with you that with success comes challenges, and we have faced our own. Right now we seem to be doing quite well, but we have had challenges for those of you that have memories of what has happened over the last couple of decades. First of all, incumbency has promoted deep regional roots with strong civic, cultural, and educational support. You can't go down the street without meeting somebody who has a connection to the aerospace industry, whether it was your father, grandfather, or sister, or cousin that works for either Boeing or a subcontractor or an airline. It is an essential industry that has touched lives of almost everyone in this state. The second thing is that a key reason for Puget Sound and the greater Pacific Northwest growing into what it is today, it was predicted in the 1983 book Megatrends by John Nesbitt, who said that Washington State is one of the 5 bellwether states. If you want to know what's going on and what the future holds, look at Washington State. And this is before Starbucks, Microsoft, it was before any of the major names that you associate with innovation in this state. And so he was right. But with that success comes perhaps a little bit of an entitlement attitude. What you get in terms of wage gains and economy and the benefits of what our industries have provided, it's hard to take that away. And so there have been times in the past, and as mentioned in the first AFA op-ed that I wrote in March, there are a number of challenges that we have that come with this entitlement attitude, and almost bordering on arrogance that no one else can beat us, we deserve our high wages, and we'll continue to escalate our standard of living here because we're Washington State and we are the epicenter of aerospace. Not so fast, because if anybody has been to the Paris or Farnborough Air Show, there's at least 25 states hawking themselves to be the place that will take Washington State's place, because they have low wages, they have lower cost of living, certainly less congestion, and they're willing to give out large sums of money to attract those companies. So we can lose, and we have lost. So other states are competing, and other countries are competing fiercely for what we take for granted. So that's something to consider as we think about what it takes to keep our aerospace strong and to grow it going forward. What do we have to lose? We have 460,000 direct and indirect high-wage jobs, with about $14 billion in direct employment in the state, which drives 15% of the state's GDP, and it pays $2.5 billion in B&O taxes to the state that help support our civic and transportation and healthcare needs of our organization here in the state. Let me now talk about considerations for the aerospace site selection decisions that are being made around the world, which you read about all the time. First of all, incumbency. Let's not forget that incumbency does have its advantage. It's hard to move from where you're at. There's a high cost to move. And so we shouldn't just take that for granted that, well, since we're here, companies won't decide to leave. They do. Our skill-based and educated workforce is a big draw. One of the biggest draws for aerospace site selection is, in fact, the skill base, and we've got it. The average cost of labor. Good news is that we've done well. Bad news is that our cost of labor is higher than in other states like South Carolina, Alabama, Oklahoma, and other places like that. Our cost of housing. Anybody that's read the newspaper recently has seen that we have some of the highest costs of living and costs of housing in the nation. I think we have, for the last several quarters, if not a couple years, have had the highest increase in appreciation of home values. Good news for those that have homes, bad news for those that are moving here. Our higher education availability is bar none. We have some of the best engineering and math and STEM education programs in the country, and that availability is a draw for companies that want to move to locations. Transportation infrastructure. When I first came here in 1972, it didn't take much time to cross the bridge or move up and down 405. Anybody that's taken that trip recently know that we have a challenge there. The tax burden, the overall tax burden, not only state income taxes for business as well as personal, but other sources of tax, whether it be excise taxes on vehicles or real estate, other kinds of taxes. When you add them all up, Washington State probably is in the middle of the pack. We don't have a state income tax, and that is a draw for many aerospace companies. Obviously, our cultural, recreational, civic environment, government and business support, and politics and business strategy all have something to do with aerospace site selections. And we've done well, but we can't take that for granted. Who do we compete with globally? You can see this chart here real quick. The aerospace business, in particular the commercial aircraft manufacturing business, has a very strong root in France. You just look at some of the parts of the airplane, whether it be the aileron, fuselage, or empennage, those are French words, and France has been involved, and as you know, that's the home of Airbus in Toulouse. But they also have many other companies there, Dassault, Latécoère, Safran and Thales, and other companies that are very important to the global aerospace business, and they have a very high employment base. They have people like me making speeches just like this right there, and so they don't take it for granted. England is a big location for aerospace, and many companies like British BAE Systems, GKN, and other companies like that, Senior PLC, Ultra, and Cobham are all based in the UK. China is coming up. Many of you wouldn't really think that that would be the case, but there are 600,000 direct workers in the aerospace industry in China, not just for COMAC and AVIC, but also for their defense industry. And it's increasingly becoming the home of many US and European companies to do business there. Canada also has about 80,000 people directly employed by the aerospace industry, not only for subsidiaries of U.S. and French and other companies, but also their hometown favorite, Bombardier. And you can see that there are some other countries involved, some of them in the supply chain, whether it be in Germany or Poland, Czech Republic, Mexico, Japan, Brazil, and Russia. And these are all countries looking to expand their aerospace business for all the reasons we just talked about. Let's now talk about our competition in the United States. The first slide here will be based on jobs, and you can see that Washington State is the #2 employer of direct aerospace jobs. This is 2016 data, so I'm sure that will change either up or down. It did go down last year, and you can see that we're only second to California. But Washington State, being the home of the Boeing company and many of its supply chain, is probably one of the reasons why you see so many suppliers like you that are here. Followed by Texas, Florida, Arizona, Connecticut, Kansas, Virginia, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, all of which make up about 50%. Those top 7 states, 50% of the total employment in the United States. So when you look at where is aerospace and who are our competitors by size in terms of jobs, it's 1/3 of the jobs that are in California, Washington, and Texas. And so that's who we think about when we are looking at our competitors. The ones that are not on this chart are the ones that have come up more recently, whether it be Alabama, Oklahoma, South Carolina, North Carolina, and places like that in the South. We're increasingly becoming very competitive, and I'll show you a couple pictures in a minute that demonstrate that. Based on wages, Washington is in the middle of the top 10 states, with Massachusetts being one of the highest cost of wages because of Raytheon being there, as well as some other companies that have very senior headquarter type people there who are paid very highly. Colorado being the home of Lockheed Space, where many of the PhD scientists in rocketry and other sciences that support space are located. California, people know that California does have a high cost of wages, and then New Hampshire, surprisingly, is high because of the old Lockheed organization up in Nashua. And then New Jersey, and then Missouri, Maryland, and Connecticut, and Arizona, principally in Phoenix as well as in Tucson, where Honeywell and Raytheon Missile Systems are located. So let's look at competitiveness related to exports. Obviously, Washington is the #1 state by virtue of exports by a factor of 3 times, with about $50 billion in exports. 3 times bigger than our nearest competitor, California. And Washington accounts for about 35% of all aerospace and defense exports, primarily Boeing airplanes. California, Connecticut, and Texas are distant competitors. Now let's switch to the topic of market dynamics. What's going on in commercial aircraft, and what's driving the demand, and what's driving your sales order book if you're a supplier? Well, first of all, it all starts with us who travel. Travel demand is increasing by about 5.3% CAGR, which is well over twice GDP for the global economy. And don't know when that'll stop, but it's been estimated that only 6 to 20% of the world's population has ever flown. And of that, there's about 3 billion passenger enplanements per year. And I know many of you don't just do it once a year. You get on a plane many times a year, so you're included in that 3 billion. So even though there's 7 billion people, there's 3 billion enplanements. That doesn't mean that there's a 40 to 50% travel rate among everybody. It's a select population that's traveling, and they want to travel cheaper. And that's what's driving much of the cost pressure that you're feeling from your customers. So during that period of time, of this chart, 81 to 2015, we've gone from 1 trillion to over 6 trillion revenue passenger kilometers. If there was ever a growth industry, this is it. Let me move on to another dynamic here, and that's what's driving aircraft production. And that is that the airlines are now profitable. I don't know if anybody here from Alaska or Horizon or any of the airlines are here, but you know, this is a good time to be in the airline business. But there was a time when it was horrible. And I can remember that there were a very large number of bankruptcies in the recession of 1999 to 2003. But you can see the cumulative profitability has greatly improved. And what does that mean is that with strong demand and capacity discipline, extra fees, and cost reduction, airlines can now afford airplanes. So let's move on to that topic, the demand and supply of airplanes. Keeping in mind that we've got this 5.3% CAGR improvement in RPKs, we're seeing about a 5.7% year-on-year increase in global seat capacity. So for those of you that are afraid that there might be a bubble in the 10-year backlog or the 9-year backlog, keep in mind that there are many retirements. So we're not adding just 1,400 airplanes a year between Airbus and Boeing. We're adding something like 700 because we're taking out a bunch of airplanes that are less fuel efficient in the marketplace. So net additions is really what you ought to look at. But again, this is an industry that continues to grow to not only replace the obsolete aircraft, but to meet new customer demand. Another thing that I look at when we're talking about market dynamics is the annual production levels, which I just described. It's increasing 30% through 2027, and it's increased 230% over that same period of time that we've talked about. It wasn't that long ago on this side of the pond that the Boeing Aircraft Company was only making 200 airplanes a year. Now they're almost going to hit 700 in that period of time. So I think that this is an industry that continues to see an increase in passenger demand to fly like us, and new, more efficient, more comfortable, more reliable, and more safe airplanes to fly in. So let's talk about that backlog we talked about. You can see that we keep adding quite a bit, and we are now well over 3 times as high as we were back in the first part at the beginning of this century. And we have a backlog that is almost hitting 14 years long. Now, another thing to consider when we're talking about the competitiveness of the market is moving from market dynamics to now production. And this is where you as suppliers in the room would be most interested to hear and perhaps vent your frustration at your customer for the relentless pricing pressure that you're feeling. Well, let me direct your attention away from big airplane companies to you, the flyer. We are flying for 47% cheaper on a CPI adjusted basis than we were in 1990. Someone has got to pay for that. And what that caused in that period that I talked about in the late 90s and the early 2000s was that 150 airlines went out of business because of their inability to price their product at the increasingly lower demanded rate of flying for aircraft. So aircraft operators. So with pension obligations and unaffordable cost structures, they revamped and now they charge fees for everything, and they have done a better job of managing their costs. So what that still requires is a lower direct operating cost, fuel, the labor involved, the pilots and the flight attendants and the whole infrastructure, as well as the capital cost of that aircraft. And you can see that there has been a significant change in the way that that's done. And I'll just, for the moment, talk about operating margins as one measure of profitability. You can see that some parts of the aerospace supply chain, particularly aerostructures, the body of the aircraft, the parts, the metallic parts, are making about 4.9% operating margin, which is pretty low when you compare that to American industry that's more like 10 to 12%. But it's not evenly distributed. The engine manufacturers are making almost 20% profit margin. The tier 2 manufacturers are making well over 17%. And if you're in electronics, whether it be avionics or servo actuation, you're at almost 13%. And You compare that to the OEM, Boeing and Airbus and Bombardier and Embraer. They're making, on average, 8.6%, and that's an improvement. And so you can see why there's a lot of discussion in the press and by pundits and executives, both at the supplier level as well as at the OEM level, this challenging discussion about evening out the profit margin and value stream. And so the recent announcement of Rockwell Collins's acquisition by United Technologies is bringing all that to the fore. And in fact, in today's newspaper, there's another article in the Wall Street Journal about how some of those companies are going to start insourcing their parts and making it themselves so they can even out the market dynamics of that kind of trend. Another thing to think about in production cost dynamics is the cost structure related to that supply chain. Keep in mind that most of the cost structure is in the supply chain. I remember when I first started back in the late 90s that Boeing made about 70% of their parts. Now they make 30 or 20 or even 10% of their parts depending on what airplane program. So where's the money, as Jerry Maguire said? It's, where is the money? So it's in the supply chain. So what has happened is that OEMs, in response to that, are narrowing down their number of suppliers that they work with, and suppliers like you are then managing suppliers below you. And they're bulking up and becoming systems integrators with a lot of pricing power and intellectual property rights themselves. And they're taking on the financial, product development, and program management risk they didn't have to have before. It's also becoming globalized. So the arguments at the WTO about subsidies and so forth are somewhat of a toothless tiger, because many of those airplane manufacturers are buying things, for instance, in France, are buying 50% of their parts from the US or other places. And the same thing with US or Canadian airplane manufacturers. They're buying many of their parts from non-sovereign states, not their own country. So it is becoming much more globalized. But that's causing some of the supply chain to reach a breaking point. Some have gone out of business because they just can't afford to tool up and to bring the people on. They can't afford to take the program risk, the pay-to-play scenario where the risk-sharing partnerships require you to hold your inventory and get paid when they get paid. And that causes significant pressure on your profit margins. So the guidance I would provide to suppliers is to look at the factors of competition. Scale economy, bigger can be better because you can spread your overhead. Risk-taking and technology innovation, agility, skills and talent, and your customer presence and your long-term relationships with your customer is going to always help you. Also, chasing the cost curve down is not a winning formula by itself. In fact, better before cheaper parts is a better formula. Fewer parts that use less power, they can last on wing longer because they have less weight, they're more fuel efficient, and they have more expanded functionality. I know it's hard to do when you're thinking about just getting your parts delivered on time as promised, to think about innovation in this way, but otherwise you'll be driven into commoditization and down that cost curve that you can't stand anymore. It's a point when you're making 3% or 4% margin, is it really worth it? And how do you deal with that cost structure? Overhead, direct and indirect labor, taking a continued look at that, your supply chain itself, and the new app, I'll call it, in aerospace, and that's the industrial internet, where robotics and automation and all your processes, taking out labor, which increasingly is more expensive, will be to your competitive advantage. So let me now finish up here with a couple thoughts for you. Where does Washington State stand in terms of a balanced scorecard, the pluses and minuses to consider? And I would say that clearly, as we stated at the top of this discussion, incumbency, the skilled workforce, the K through 12 and higher ed, the infrastructure, both good and bad, as well as regional amenities. It's a desirable location, and of course the 2003 B&O tax incentives all make Washington State the go-to place, the reason why this is the epicenter of aerospace for the world. But let's not talk too lightly about disadvantages, and I'll provide this direct thought for you, that this is not a right-to-work state, and it has driven many companies to Oklahoma, to South Carolina, North Carolina, Texas, and other places like that. That's the reality. That's not a value statement on my part. That's just the reality of what companies say to me when they move there. It's a high-cost state for, and region for housing and labor costs, both good news and bad news. But I think our people are worth it. They can innovate and they can provide value for that high wage that they earn. And we could do a better job of selling that. We have a complex and time-consuming regulatory process. I've had one client tell me that I could get a building approved and through the process and built in 6 months, where it would take me a year and a half here. That's a problem. Traffic congestion. I know the state's working on that, but that's an issue. And an inability to offer certain attractive economic incentives. When I was the special advisor to Governor Locke in 2003, designing that package, we just could not do the kind of things that other states could do. They can actually give away money to specific companies. We can't do that here. And our toolkit is limited in terms of what we could do. We did just enough to get the Boeing company to make the 787 here. And if we can continue to make sure that we look at that, I think that would be good. Lastly, let me talk about complacency and entitlement. They are our worst enemy, and we're not as hungry. I can see it when we go to the Paris and Farnborough Air Show. We are not as hungry as the other states are, and that can be a problem. And we have a lot to lose. So what could we do? We want to make sure that we continue to have the 1 or 2 tools that we've been able to exercise, and that's the 2003 and 2014 state B&O tax relief. Some of you noted that in the WTO and the EU that the lawsuit was overturned in the state of Washington in the U.S. Trade Representative's favor. So again, the tit for tat, the back and forth war that's going on, which represents the toothless tiger that I described, at least for now, is in the state of Washington's favor. So that B&O tax relief won't have to be rolled back. Government and industry public support for STEM education and innovation, very important. Transportation infrastructure, important. Let's learn from the losses from our aerospace site selection contest and address our deficiencies. We've been very fortunate to get Mitsubishi to move to Mitsubishi Aircraft, do their test and evaluation in Moses Lake and set that up. We've got some other things that are likely to happen in Washington State's favor, but we have a lot of losses in that column. And we should probably learn, instead of just turning away, we should learn what it is that other companies have done to decide to move to other states or other countries. Some of the things we can't do anything about. It's political, it has something else to do other than what you can actually do. And then address our ongoing concerns about our right to work laws. I don't know what that means. I'm not going to provide a personal or specific evaluative statement, but it is a concern that has been brought up by companies who have moved other places. What can be done to address that? It doesn't mean necessarily rolling it back. There may be some other things that can be done. Sell the benefits of our workforce skill-based education, incumbency, geographic desirability, and amenities. And because we have to do this. We can't be complacent, and we have to look and feel and act more hungry. What's at risk? 460,000 direct and indirect high-wage jobs with a $14 billion payroll, which drives 15% of our state GDP, which pays $2.5 billion into our state tax coffers. So I'd like to end by just mentioning that this is an industry that is so important and vital to our economy. It not only has invented the way we travel and changed the way that we shop with the internet, satellite communications, but also, when necessary, defend our way of life. So I'm delighted to be here to share some thoughts with you about what this means for Washington State as well as for me personally. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Tom, for those insightful remarks, which reinforce some of the things that we know and maybe open our eyes to what we can do in the next few years. So at this moment, we can entertain a networking break.